Is it better to be busted or bad? Here's the question for today's video, and I want to actually raise this topic in regards to Willow, the newest released champion in Paladins, and get your thoughts on it. Kind of go through what I consistently consider the better version of a champion being released, whether they should be busted in terms of this is broken, it's too good, OP, nerf it now before it even comes out. I'm quitting if I see this in the game, which those are real comments, by the way. Or is it better to release a champion bad and have them kind of get the scorn of the community, as in, why would you release this weak champion that should be so cool? Her animations are great, she deserves more damage, like, you know, something that happened with Inara. There are always two sides to every story. Let me tell you mine. My name is Rainday as well. Welcome to another episode of Rainday Gaming. Today in this topic, I do want to mention that I've covered something similar to this before in the top 5 reasons why OP God releases are good for Smite. Now, this is before I worked for Hi-Rez. In fact, I had no professional relationship with the company. In fact, I'm not even sure people knew who I was. This was kind of the first video that I did that ended up getting a little bit of kind of outer love outside of the people who would consistently watch my videos. It ended up reaching 100,000 views and more. It got featured on the Smite Community Show, which Andy Sexton ran, who ended up being my first boss at Hi-Rez, so the irony is real there. But it was really talking about the benefits of what I believed at that time for Hi-Rez to be doing when they release a god to the game. Largely, this was in discussion and at the same time interval of Raijin being released, and a lot of people thought he looked very good on paper, could do a lot in a lot of different modes and be very effective, and I was commenting that I think gods should be OP to start out. I would much rather have them lend to the side of being extremely powerful than extremely weak. So listen, I know I've already triggered 800 people. You guys can all go watch the video, comment on it, tell me why I'm wrong, and a lot of people who are like, yeah, I totally agree, can go watch it and be, you know, justified in their reasoning, tell me why I'm right. That's exactly why the video got a lot of views, because a lot of people felt very differently about it. But again, I bring it back to Paladins now, after we're kind of looking at the results of Willow's first reception to the community and looking at how that could be a positive or a negative thing. But a lot of people who I noticed in my comment sections of my recent video are reacting to the right mouse button, the dead zone, where you basically can have 100% cauterize and 100% wrecker if you take the legendary within 2 seconds, and it's completely negating you know, what they think and on paper any frontline healing or tank actually playing on the point. And I'm kidding you not, I saw people in the comment section saying, if this champion comes out, I am quitting Paladins. Like, this will not work. I main front lines and this is not okay for me. And you know, I was kind of laughing at that a little bit internally, because I'm just like, I never have that thought, right? I never go into games and I see them, you know, put out a new champion and think, oh my god, what is going to be my experience playing against that? I'm always like, I want to play it, right? That's the way I look at things. So I never think like, this is going to be so bad for me, because I'm always playing the new champion. For those who do only play frontliners or only play supports, you know, that is a different perspective. I'm a variety guy, so I'm always playing the new and different, and so I never feel like I'm kind of locked in. So it's an interesting point of view, but I was also really surprised to see people take that, and it kind of brought up this opinion of, you know, do they just think something that's so OP like that should not be introduced into the game whatsoever? And this is all speculation. I mean, from our playtest internally, this was a effective ability, but not OP, right? It didn't change. It's not like everyone who had Fairy won. This is not the Bomb King Masters Land scenario, or Willow, excuse me. You know, it was very, very balanced in its actual application in game, because there's a lot of ways to just move out of it. You don't have to stand there in your shield. You know, it persists only for a certain amount of time. A lot of times Fairy's doing damage and fighting other people, so it's not necessarily she's just staring at the point all game long and only applying dead zones there, you know what I mean? And it also has a cooldown, like it's not up forever. So there were a lot of different aspects to it that made it less like a permanent no frontline healer than most people would think on paper. But from a strictly itemized statistical standpoint of the numbers, it's really strong. But I'd rather have it that way than be really, really weak. I feel like there's just no benefit in putting out a new champion that isn't exciting, that isn't fun, that isn't strong. You know, for me, I've always wanted to play something that seemed new, interesting, maybe a little bit overpowered, maybe a little bit like trying to do something different in the game. and testing that out, seeing how it changes the dynamic. I feel like that's how metas and games evolve and change. You know, new champions, new maps, they bring these new play styles that maybe are a little bit different than what people are used to, and I think that's a benefit. I think it keeps people on their toes. I think it creates a lot of conversation, a lot of interest, and a lot of press. I think it creates videos like this where people are really interested and have both sides of the opinion on it, to further, I think, create interest in playing the game and seeing how it goes for themselves. But I also think the most important thing for me is it's more fun, I think, to play, you know, with a champion who is effective than a champion who you feel like every single time you go out there you're at a disadvantage for playing them. I think it's better to be on that side from a not only a player perspective, but I think also from a design perspective, it's so much easier, I think, to get, you know, a little bit of information about what these champions do so well and why is that strong. You know, when people play a champion competitively, when they have the opportunities to experiment with them and feel like they're not at a disadvantage and say, oh, this looks pretty good, this looks strong on paper, I'm ready to use it, I don't feel bad or iffy like I'm risking my, you know, potential earnings by playing this champion, then we get all that feedback. I mean, everyone sees it, right? You can see exactly why that champion's strong, you see what they're doing so well. It's just that much more information to go on. And I think, you know, again, getting to the crux of why I think this is better is that ultimately tuning down, in my opinion, and in my experience, is a lot easier than trying to tune up. And there are two reasons why tuning up is harder than tuning down. Tuning up could result in situations like the Bomb King Masters LAN, where basically Bomb King was lag compensated before LAN, and in that patch became the most dominant player by like 2 standard deviations, it felt like. Just anybody who had Bomb King was basically winning the game, except the best Paladins players in the world. And what it meant was that anybody except the 5 best Paladins players in the entire world lost if Bomb King was not on their team. I mean, it was phenomenal how much a small lag compensation change affected that character. And that's why it's scary to try and tune up, because you never know how small of a tune, what that tune will actually do to make that character maybe broken. The other reason why tuning up can be difficult is because sometimes when you're wary of going too far, you can't go far enough. Very much like Inara. I believe she really doesn't yet have the rhythm to be an effective front line in this game. And as much as I've pushed for it, it almost feels like buff after buff after buff hasn't changed anything, and there's this kind of feeling in the community like, well, maybe this is just it. Maybe we just sit and accept that Inara is not a viable frontline in this game at a high level. And that's kind of a frustrating experience too. I mean, I don't think anybody wants that for more champions in the game. I certainly don't, and I'd want to be able to say my champion that I like or this champion is viable, anything. It's just a flavor of the day that I want to pick. Any champion, if I play it really well, can be as successful as anyone else in my role. But that's really not always the case, and Inara is a good example of someone who's gotten buff after buff after buff, trying to tune up to viability, but still hasn't reached that in the higher levels of play. Now again, the other thing is that we haven't had enough of the high-res, higher levels of play esports competitions over these last 3 weeks since her most recent buff, which means that maybe she is there, and we don't have enough information yet from higher level players. Maybe the tune-ups were enough, and so holding off on doing another buff and then doing another buff before you see what the effects are of your previous buffs is really important, and again, a harder part of tuning up, right? Because you don't know if you really do need to add something to her kit or add some effectiveness, or if the effectiveness is already there and no one has just shown its efficacy yet. I mean, imagine if Inara actually is super viable and when played with the right comp is like the best tank in the game. And what if we then, before seeing that over the next 2 weeks, buffed her 2 more times? I mean, we could have a Bomb King type scenario for a frontline if we didn't realize the impact of the previous buffs, which is another danger, I think, and difficulty in trying to tune a character up. Balance is a balancing act. It's not a fixed state. It's a constant, ever-changing, dynamic representation of who's good, who's bad, what works, what doesn't work, which is always shifting by creativity, by new innovations from players in the game, and by new developments and changes from a design perspective, and new introductions of new mechanics from players and champions like Willow. But although we aim for balance, I do think that it is relatively impossible to put out a completely balanced champion from the start. I feel like either way, their skills will either be for the meta or against it in some way. They'll either be very strong or very weak. There will be some tilt either way, and I think that I'd rather have that tilt lead them to be effective so we can get the information, so we could see them and understand what their strengths are, their true strengths and application in the game, and be able to adjust accordingly, rather than kind of hoping, wishing, and assuming that we know what's best for a champion who's never been played at a high level, who doesn't have much exposure, and try to make the perfect move that will get them to a viable place, but not too viable, so that we don't have another Bomb King catastrophe on our hands. Now, these are my thoughts, my opinion. I want to hear yours as well. A lot of people have in the past taken these arguments and chopped them up and tried to isolate what I've said and make counter arguments against those specific points. But I think this is more of a holistic approach that I'm taking. I think balance, again, just to reiterate and summarize, is not something easily achieved at the get-go. I think a champion leans either to be a little bit less competitive or a little bit more competitive. And if I'm going to choose which way I'd like a champion to lean, I'd like them to lean to be more competitive and be able to tune down and adjust those things that are maybe a little too strong after getting a lot of feedback about that champion, versus trying to speculate what type of improvements or what type of adjustments and additions we can make to a champion who's not really getting a lot of experience, not getting a lot of play time, and trying to hope that they end up just viable enough and don't break the system by having too big of a buff. So, busted or bad? What would you rather have for Willow? Let me know in the comment section below if you want to leave that right mouse button as strong as it seems on paper, or if you'd rather have the little fairy come into the realm with a little bit less efficacy on canceling out healing and shields on the point. Can't wait to hear what you all have to say, and thanks again for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for more, and catch me live streaming. I should be going live either today or tomorrow, so make sure to tune in to that. As always, remember to never give up, never stop gaming, and I'll see you all next time.